Welcome, Mountain Mamas, for Mountain Mama Guides for 2024. We're glad to have you guys helping us this year. We wanted to include a video on just basic skills for guiding trips and the things that you just need to know on how to manage and all the stuff that's coordinated with that. So first thing, we require all our guides to have some medical training, first aid and CPR certification required for assistant and lead guides. You can get that on your own, or you can do it through our medical director, Brian Nelson. He teaches it in March and September of every year for minimal fee. Our lead guides are also required to do wilderness first responder training. That's taught. You can get that training as well on your own. But we also work through 12 Finger Guides, and they teach it November, December of every year, if anyone's interested in that. You should know that any of our assistant guides who want to become lead guides, any of the advanced training, including wilderness first responder training, is covered 50%. Mountain Mamas will help subsidize those trainings for you. And we hope to have other trainings in the future that you guys will have options to be able to take to continue your education as well. So we also provide skills training. We do most of our, we want to make sure all our guides are well trained. We do a lot of in-house training. If you already have skills, that's fantastic. We just need to have you pass them off. The easiest place to do that, to get the training and to pass off training, is at our guide conferences, which we hold 3 times a year. Our winter training, anyone who wants to do snowshoeing, downhill skiing, snowboarding, cross-country skiing, we will be holding that clinic in January. And then those of you guys who want to pass off for next year, for January or for 2025, any of our mountain skills, that includes caving, backpacking, and survival skills, you can attend that clinic in March. And then anyone who wants to do ropes and water skills for 2025, the next year, the training for that is in September as well. So we provide that in-house training. You're of course welcome if you want to learn a new skill and pass that off to us, or if you are having to recertify every year. These skills just need to be done either at the guide conferences or to a lead guide of that skill that you're passing off. So you're doing canoeing, you can't attend the conferences, you have awesome canoe skills, then you just need to find one of our lead canoe guides or me as the lead trainer and pass those skills off to us in person. And you can do that anytime the year before you want to be a guide. So those are the trainings we provide, and we're excited to have you guys participate in those and hopefully boost up your training if you want to learn new things as well. Our whole organization's run on you volunteer guides, and so we're just so grateful to have you ladies. We are also providing canyoneering skills clinics twice a year. These are for basically, we provide basic clinics for our women that they need to show off their skills before they go on any canyoneering trips. We do that one in September and in March of every year. And then if you want to be a canyoneering guide, that's the ropes training we do in September. We are redoing our canyoneering trip program next year, and we'll give you guys more information on that later. All right, so that's our trainings that we provide for guides. Now the safety stuff that we provide, kind of our safety policies that we do. We try and Mountain Mamas is actually a pretty safe organization. We've been doing this for 8-9 years now, and we're just really proud of our safety track record, and we want to keep that going well. The way we do that is by minimizing risk ahead of time. So a lot of that is you guys have been trained medically first, and then as a backup or as our behind the scenes, every trip, no matter how big or small, has a base commander, which is the person who is not present on the trip that you're going to be communicating with about the trip. So usually that's the spouse of our lead guides or anyone you want it to be. A lot of times it's me, but any of our lead guides can be a base commander for you. They just need to be trained on how to be a base commander. The base commander is, both you and the base commander are emailed before a trip, the full list of women that are going to be on the trip, plus all their medical information, their emergency contacts. They're also emailed the trip report that you fill out. So the guide and the base commander both have that trip report. That way your base commander kind of knows, who's going to be on those trips, who to contact in case of emergencies, and kind of your basic itinerary, including links for trailheads and things like that. The base commander also, it's your job to check in with them before, in the middle, and at the end of every trip. So they kind of know how things are going. They know if, okay, she checked in at the trailhead and I'm looking, that's an hour later than what she had scheduled. That gives them an idea of, okay, they might be delayed, and know that. Same with if you're checking in and halfway and you are also about more than halfway, they can see if you're a little delayed, and that helps them kind of give a heads up to any of their family members if anyone's got concerns. And then of course, at the end of the trip, we need to know if everyone made it back safely and all that jazz. The base commander is also in charge of contacting families and emergency contacts, your emergency contacts, if you have been delayed or if there's any need for search and rescue or anything like that. So they contact families, and they're also in charge of contacting search and rescue. The next thing we have is trainings. Our lead guides and assistant guides receive medical and skills training. And then the third thing we do for our safety is we have our awesome first aid kits, and you guys can watch the first aid training on another video. Now, guiding trips. This is a big thing. Over all these years, we have learned hopefully how to run these trips smoothly and with as little discomfort, and to make them as successful as possible. So before every trip, we want to make sure that you as the guide do a recon. I know we're a little bit different from a lot of organizations, but we have this is required as a mandatory thing. We have, I think, 8 different types of trips we do. And I know this seems really confusing to people, but we have intro clinics that are meant for someone who's never done something ever, and requires a lot of intensive training. Or just the women have our guide is providing a lot of additional training to help people. Then we have our beginner trips for people who are just kind of started into things, but it's not too technical of a trip. Then we have our intermediate trips that are also not too they're not really high risk activities, but they need a little bit more skills to do those. And then we have our extreme trips, where it's just something that women have to have some sort of skill before they go on these trips and need to show our guide or prove in some way that they have these skills before they can go on these more extreme trips. Then we also have family trips, and we have international trips, and we also have races that we do now starting 2024. Yay! So as you guys, for guides, we have our assistant guides. You're allowed to teach beginner and intermediate, lead beginner and intermediate trips, mostly because these are low risk skills, low risk activities, usually not too far out of town, and something that you feel comfortable teaching. Usually not water activities and not rope activities, because those are considered more high risk. Our lead guides are in charge of teaching intro clinics, extreme trips. And mostly because those two groups require a lot more intensive skills. And we want to make sure we have a lot more medical experience for somebody who's on those trips. The family trips and all those other ones can be taught by assistants and leads, depending on the risk of those trips, especially with international as well. So those are different types of trips we do. For recons, if you are doing a beginner or an intermediate trip, we ask that you do the recon, if it's in the summertime, 4 to 6 weeks ahead before that trip. It can be up to you can do it a week before, but we don't want you to get too far out of the season for that trip. So if you're leading your trip in the summer, we don't want you to do the recon in like winter or early spring. We want to have similar conditions to what you're going to be doing on your trip. If it is a winter trip, we like that window to kind of be shortened to, if you could have checked out that trip within the last 2 weeks is ideal, because winter changes, winter changes daily, but we just ask that you can kind of check it out, whether the trail is now muddy, icy, snowy, women just need to know the conditions on those winter trips. Same with intro, extreme, and the family trips. The intro, extreme, and family trips can be reconned up to 1 year as long as they were done in the same season, just because those are usually bigger, more intensive trips. And so it's hard to ask our guides to do 2 of those in a year. So if you can do it the year before and get a lot of your beta, then that's fine. The office, when you're planning a trip, the office will start the Slack channel 2 weeks before for the beginner and the intermediate trips. And then 4 weeks before if it's an intro or an extreme trip or a family trip. And then they're going to post all the trip information on Slack for that trip. They'll confirm the participants. And we also collect emergency contact information and medical information, and we organize carpooling. So you do not have to do any of that for your trips. Your job is to update the information from the recon on the Slack channel once it's been started, and then fill out the trip report 1 to 2 weeks before your trip. So usually a lot of gals, when they do the recon, then they like to go in and do their trip report. Now, the trip report has right here, it might be backwards for you. I'm so sorry, but I'll include a link you can look at the full document. But essentially it has a pre-trip column and a post-trip. Sorry, I'm recovering from cold. All right. So on the pre-trip report, you're required to put down, it'll have a spot for guide, date of activity, the activity type, so hiking, backpacking, proposed location, your trailhead, which we like you to include a Google link, if possible, for our base commander. The route, if you can include an all trails link or any mountain trail forks or any of those websites that have more of like a trip that kind of includes like the trail and the route and all that stuff. If you don't have that, then just type in, gonna be here, going to this place, blah, 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 so we know. The lead guide and assistant guides, we will type that in for you so you'll know who your assistants will be, unless you have someone who's preferred to have, you already asked. Time frame of activity, we do want you to kind of block down the time. Base commander, we'll make sure that you write that in. If you don't know that, we will put that in for you, plus their phone number. Then we also ask that you put a time for the base commander to contact the family in case there is a delay. That's usually 2 hours after you were planned to return to the trailhead. And then we also have a time for the base commander to contact search and rescue, and that is 4 hours after the time you were scheduled to come back to the trailhead. Now there's also a number of participants and guides. We will put that in for you because that's constantly changing. We will also be in charge of the waivers and make sure those have all been signed for you and put that in. Medical needs of participants, we will put that in, though I do ask that our office will contact you and let you know when that information has been updated so you can review that before. Please make sure you know who's got diabetes, who's got asthma, who's recovering from surgery, blah, 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 blah. When you meet the people and you kind of have an idea, make sure you know who they are and let your assistant guides know who they are, because likely they're going to be the ones that might be in the back. And then you need to keep an eye on them. Transportation, usually that's on your own. You can just type that on their own menu, type it on your own in the trip report, unless there's something going on that you're having some sort of coordinated meal. Weather, do check the weather a few days before and update that so you kind of have an idea. Sometimes up to a week if you can, but it's always changing, I know. But the idea is that you have a kind of an idea of what kind of weather you're going to be hopping into and can give your gals a heads up if things change. Unforeseen events, accidents, first aid kit, supplies. Do we have a spot for you to just put things that you feel like would be potential concerns on this trip? If we're rock climbing, then possibly falls or rock fall, or you're hiking, sprains and strains and, you know, abrasions and trips and falls and things, just things that you shows that we have thought ahead, or you have thought ahead as a guide of the things that you're concerned about and you're going to be watching for. Emergency evacuation options. We want you to make sure that you put on this trip report whether it's cell phone reception or you need a beacon. And the only way you can really find that is by doing your recon. So let us know after the recon if you need a beacon for that trip. We only have one on Mountain Mamas right now. So if we have 2 trips that need beacons on the same weekend, then we just need to coordinate that with other gals who have them. And then make sure at the bottom you also put your guide hours completed, please. So on the recon, right, how many hours? I want this to include your drive time. We use this information for grants to show them how amazing you are and how much of your time you're putting into these trips as a volunteer. So be liberal with this. And then tips, notes, and special remarks at the very bottom is where you put or anything that you know that you're, you know, I want to know where the bathrooms are. We want to know, like, is there weird permits, things about parking, blah, 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 blah. Put all those things there in your pre-trip report so we kind of have an idea of what's going on. And then you can, of course, put any of those things that you learned from your recon on the Slack channel for your gals to know. After you fill out their trip report, then the office will fill out those sections that I talked to you about, the medical information, number of participants, guides, waivers, all that kind of stuff. And then it's your job prior to every trip to pick up walkie-talkies. And you need to have at least 2 walkie-talkies if you have a group of more than like 4 women. For you and your assistant guide. If you have a group of more than 10, then you can get 3 walkie-talkies, whatever you feel like you need. And then a beacon as well, if you feel like you need it for the trip, and then the first aid kits. You can get 1 or 2 first aid kits depending on how big your groups are. Of course, if you do any overnight trips, you have to have guide kit 1, first aid kit 1, that has a lot of more of the medical stuff in that as well. Now, during a trip, it's important that when you first get all the ladies together, we like to do a big circle up. And if circle ups are great, there's a lot of good things that can happen by circling everyone up first. I like to just kind of get a head count of who's here. Just get a basic number, because a lot of times people drop out at the last second, things like that. Instantly, if someone shows up to a trip and says, hey, here's my friend Jan, and she really wanted to come on this trip, has not signed a waiver, has not paid membership dues, she is not allowed on the trip. You can say, thanks for coming, but you cannot be on our trip. That's what insurance tells us we can tell people. All right, period. And get all your women together. I like to have them all say their name, maybe something weird and quirky about them, and then how much experience they have in the activity that we're going to be doing. Because that lets me know as a guide, she's experienced, she needs some help. This is her first time ever. We want to keep an eye on her. And then it's also a good time for let everyone know who the guides are. And ideally, you guys have your red handkerchiefs tied somewhere on yourself or pack so that the women can differentiate you as the guides in case they have any concerns or anything. Then after you introduce everybody, then you want to describe the activity. What are we going to be doing? How far? Where are we going? And also any concerns that you're going to say, okay, we're going on this hike. There's this one section that's a little sketchy. There's some rock fall above. We want to go through this quickly, or there's going to be some river crossings, or there's a bridge, or we have to go through a horse pasture. Make sure you close the gate. I don't know. There's a million things. So make sure you let the women know all the risks and things and everything that you're going to anticipate going into this trip. Once you're done with your circle up, then you want to send a message off to your base commander and just let them know that you have left, whether you're using the beacon or you're just using your cell phone as a text, and just say, we've left, everything's great, whatever. Then I like to make sure that your lead guide is the one in front and your assistant guide is the one in the back. So your lead guide's done the recon, so you know where to go. So please stay in the front. If for some reason, if you're doing an activity like snowshoeing or ski, usually snowshoeing is the big one where you're having to break trail, and it's nice to kind of change who's the first one in the group. I like to have the lead guide as number 2. So you're still leading it, and you're just making sure that your other people are the one right in front of you, but you can still guide them wherever they need to go on your trip. And then usually the assistant guide is going to be the one in the back. They have the big first aid kit. And then both of you guys have the walkie-talkies to help communicate if there's any concerns. Pacing. Now, pacing is something I want to make sure that you guys do. If you are leading a group and you look back and no one is there, you are going too fast. If you look back and everyone was with you, including your assistant guide in the rear, who we actually call the sweeper or the medic, that means you've got a good pace. And then you can talk to your women. Do you want to go a little faster? You try going a little faster. If your group starts to separate, then you're going too fast for everyone. You want to keep your groups together. Now, on longer trips like Timpanogos or Deseret Peak or things like that, if you feel that there's concerns and you need to split up just for safety, I don't know. I can't see reasons why we split up groups. But if for some reason you feel like you need to do that, then you make sure that each group is with a guide with a walkie-talkie, and that they communicate constantly about where they are and that they can stay in communication. The concern about splitting up your guides, so you only have one guide per group, is if there's an emergency, then that guide is kind of a little stuck. So it's good to keep your groups together, because in case somebody has to run for help, if that person needs to be a guide or someone needs to provide emergency information, medical attention and stuff like that, you're kind of all there and you have as much support as you can. So that's pacing. Another tip I like, if you get people in the back who are just bummed out and super discouraged and frustrated, I like to bring them and have them lead, because I feel like they help keep a good pace, because if they want to go a little slower, that's fine, but they feel a little empowered because they're in the front. And so I feel like that helps with mood and keeps the trip growing a little faster, honestly, than you think it might go naturally. So that's one of my tips that I like to do. All right. Taking pictures, if you are able to as a lead, that's awesome. But usually I like to delegate that to somebody in the group or to your assistant guide if they're available, depending on that. But usually you're the one who needs to kind of keep an eye out for things, keep safety, keep an eye on other stuff that's going on. Send a message halfway to your base commander and just let them know how you're doing, whether you're now we're at the top and we're going to come back down, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But do let them know halfway through that activity. By the way, while you're going through things you want to watch and keep track of for your women, you're looking for all the medical stuff. You're looking for fatigue, hypothermia, if it's, heat, stroke, all those things. Check in with your women frequently. I know Marilyn really likes to do frequent breaks. So that just depends on your activity and how far you need to go, but do check in with your group pretty regularly, make sure they're eating, they're drinking. And this gives you a chance to kind of make sure everyone's doing okay. Catch those warm spots on their feet with blister stuff if you can. Way better to take before or after than treat after. So that just kind of check in with your group pretty regularly and keep an eye on them. If for some reason you've got someone who's got injuries, just know that, like, I like to think that getting to the top of our activity or the end of our activity is optional, but getting home is mandatory. So remember that if for some reason things are not looking good, or some people are struggling and you don't feel like it's, we need to keep our group together, it's okay. The mountains, the river, the snow, whatever is going to be there another year, or another week, it's better that we get all our women back safely. Now, if there's any injuries, minor injuries, we want you to perform first aid and document that on the incident report that's in the first aid kit and take a picture of the injury. Now, if it's a major injury, we want you, of course, to perform first aid. Call 911 or the Beacon SOS or anything else. 911 on your phone, or the Beacon has an SOS option that you can call. Plan the evacuation to get them out, whether we are going to keep them and stay here and wait for a helivac to take somebody if they have, especially if they have spinal injuries, things like that, we can't transport. Then we will wait there. We'll treat them for shock, and this is all this other medical stuff. Keep them warm, keep them safe and cozy. If they are able to walk, then we walk them out slowly and take our time. You want to, of course, photograph the injury as well, or injuries, and then document on the incident report. And usually with those larger injuries, we're doing a SOAP note because we're monitoring something over time. I usually like to, as the lead guide, to delegate writing to my assistant guide, incident report stuff. If usually more like the SOAP note stuff, because if you're in there taking care of stuff as it's happening, then you can say, okay, respirations are 16, heart rate is blah, 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 blah. I'm seeing injuries here, and you can have someone else recording that. So you can actually be the hands-on guide taking care of stuff medically. All right, after a trip, we're going to make sure we send a message to our base commander, or either by beacon or text, and make sure they know that everyone's back and safe and taken care of. That your job is also to post pictures on the Slack channel using a Google link. If you don't know how to do that, let me know. Usually you just have to download Google Photos, select the photo, a random photo in the Google Photos, select link, and then select share. And then that should be able to allow you to share that in with the Slack channel. We also want you to complete the post-trip report. So on the trip report that we had, I usually, if you can do it within a day, it's nice because all that information is fresh. But no later than a week after, we want you to fill in all this stuff. So a lot of it'll be like, no change, no concerns, but we do need you to write that for insurance reasons, especially on the medical stuff. If there was no medical concerns, right? No medical concerns, nothing happened. We need to know that and have that documented. And then of course on the tips and stuff, anything that was additionally discovered while you were on the trip. Oh, now we know that blah, 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 blah. Put that on your post-trip report, because we use all that information when we do these trips again in the future, or when we do our trips online for women to have access to. Gives them all the tips and tricks for them to be able to do the trips on their own. And then pat yourself on the back for doing a great job and bringing everyone home safely. And we're so proud of you. All right, that's it for our guide tips and tricks. Hopefully that's helpful. And thank you so much for helping us out.